fun begins.
How's it going?
Hello.
Well,
Greetings, young Jedi.
hello there.
Well, now that I've drank the Kool-Aid, let's take a look at a vintage collection clone trooper. Alright, as mentioned, we are going to take a look at a vintage collection clone trooper today. I do not collect 375. I do not collect vintage collection. My overall stance, actually, for the last couple of years, has been mirroring some. There are vintage collection collectors out there that think the Black Series should be canceled for their budget to go back to the TVC. I generally am so into the Black Series that I wouldn't hate if TVC went away. But I do have a lot of friends that have recently embraced vintage collection. That's not what I'm looking to do. They back the HasLabs. We all owe it to Blitz Transmissions for the HasLab gunship funding. He steered a lot of people towards that on the final day of campaign. 212th Hunter has been collecting 375 vehicles, both HasLab and just older, and then stocking them with figures. I am constantly getting on the Xbox party and hearing all about these Happy Meal toys that they are filling their ships with. And I have elected to, while I've been joking thus far, I do intend to respectfully take a look at this vintage collection 501st Clone Trooper from the Obi-Wan Kenobi series as an outsider and just share my thoughts as someone that generally collects something a bit bigger, a bit different. So let's get into it and get my thoughts. Here is the figure on the card back, and that is the nice thing about the vintage collection is they are very hung up on the vintage Kenner card backs. Personally, I don't have a huge attachment. They were about 25 years before my time, but that's all right. It's still just a art style that has been adored by many for years. It is that black card back with the silver border, your name of whatever media it's from, Clone Trooper 501st Legion. You have a nice picture of the 501st Clone Troopers from the Kenobi series, and then you have a picture of, or not a picture, just you see the trooper in the bubble with his weapons. Kenner logo. You have a warning and a 4+. Around back, you have a bio about the character in a few different languages. You can pause and read which one best fits. He's the VC240s. His numbering. You get a picture of the figure in front of the card back, and vintage collection logo, and then a barcode and a ton of legal information. Underneath the figure is another piece of paper with also a ton of legal information. So very standard stuff going on here. Nothing really to write home about. So let's open this guy up. And get into the review. So here we have the 501st Trooper out of the box, and my first impressions are just wild. I mean, I have not messed with a 375 figure since I myself was a much smaller person. I think my 375 days pretty well ended the day that the Black Series started, so I might have been like 14 or so. I mean, I'm just going to come in with my man-sized hand and just wrap my fingers around this figure. I mean, it is, it is little. And for the last several years, I've been into my Black Series. They're roughly double the size. I can't, good hand wrap, still reveals a lot of figure there. And, it's just, there's an element of wanting to treat it delicately, but I do think it's relatively sturdy. So that's just very initial impressions from someone that does not touch 375 like ever. So let's take a look at some of these accessories. This is the cutest little DC-15 I think I've ever seen. I mean, it is just teeny tiny. It's got some nice little details on it. It's a little less refined than the Black Series version, but like at this size it would have to be. And it's cute. Same with the long rifle. These are both in that dark gray plastic, and it again, slightly different sculpt than the Black Series, and of course shrunk down and just less refined, but that's okay. Setting that aside, let's take a look at this cute little guy. So, ultimately, I did grab this guy because it is the most recent issue of a 501st Trooper. I know the removable helmets on 375 is comically oversized. It's only a little bit with the Black Series, but these guys, the helmet would be, hanging out over the shoulders and, when they were removable. So I wanted one that just had the not removable helmet altogether. You can technically pop the head off, and you can actually see they got a double ball in there, so you got some good articulation, truthfully. But this guy's neat, I guess just to run through everything you'd expect on a 501st Trooper, is going on. The one thing worth noting is it's marketed as a Kenobi Series 501st, but he has the darker navy blue that's a little bit more accurate to the Order 66 scenes, and then the Clone Wars. The Black Series Apo is a much paler blue. It's a little more accurate to daylight scenes in Revenge of the Sith, and then the Kenobi series itself, they kind of went darker in the animation. And you can actually see it is pretty notable, even like on the card back. It's just lower light, but you can just tell. It's just a totally different shade of blue. They kind of did their own thing here. But I think this will generally fit onto most 501st collections better, because of that. The lighter blue, well, maybe more Rots accurate and Kenobi series accurate. Just the majority of the collectibles are this darker shade, and so that's not inherently a bad thing. Something I'm noticing, he's got a lot of weathering on the A on the chest, and also it's maybe pointed just a little bit to the left. It's not maybe perfectly straight up and down. It's not bad. He's got the weathering there. He's got the weathering on the stripes going down the sides of the legs, but his helmet is very clean. There's a little bit of smudging on the back, but I think that's not even smudging. I think that's QC smudging, not like scuffing. And then the shoulder pads are very clean. So it's just kind of like, I kind of wish it was maybe a little more thorough there. But the sculpt, again, it's small. It's maybe a touch stylized, but it's a pretty good looking Clone Trooper helmet, I gotta say. And then working down, he's very clean. I don't like it on the Black Series, so I'm going to say I don't like it here. I don't like it when you get weathering on the paint, but then they just don't do any like weathering like dirt grime, I think it needs to be a bit more of a blend, but this is kind of just how Hasbro does this kind of thing, and I expect that. And then working our way down, he's got a little number stamped on the inner thigh. Black Series does that sometimes, so not the end of the world. And they do the single jointed knees on these, and the knee pad sticks with the shin. I wish Black Series would do that more often. If you're going to glue it down or, mold it down to the shin rather than the thigh. He looks really good. I noticed before I even opened it, I'm going to point out, I do have a QC defect on his right thigh. The blue stripes are shifted way forward. See, there's like a line there, like it's like a mold line, a costume line, and it's basically where the drop on the back of the thigh armor is. See, on this side, it's right. The double blue lines are way more to the back side, centered even. This one kicks way forward on this one. It's a little frustrating, but it is what it is. Something that's newer since I was a kid with these 375s is they're doing the Black Series thing where it's got a pinned wrist, but it actually has like a vertical hinge and an in and out hinge. I remember a couple of Clone Wars figures had that, but that was very rare on a 375 when I was a kid. So that's really nice to see here. It makes posing a lot easier generally. I gotta say, my initial thoughts are like, again, it's not my thing. It's too little, but I don't dislike this guy either. He's kind of cool. Let's run through some articulation and start trying to form up a little bit. As mentioned, he's got that double ball neck. Allows him to look that far up, that far down, side to side, and pivot, of course. His arms can come up to a T-pose, and the shoulder pads are very rubbery, but unlike the Black Series where they're on the ring around the joint, they're glued to the bicep, and they're meant to just go into the torso like so, which is interesting. There's no butterfly joint at this scale. I don't know how you would. But there is a 360 at the shoulder. Feels like it ratchets even. That's neat. Single jointed elbows go to 90, and then swivel at the elbow, and then as mentioned, in and out on the left wrist, and up and down on the right. Interestingly, the waist articulation, he features a swivel at the waist, and then he's got the ball joint, which can turn, but also crunches that far forward, which is basically nothing, and that far back, which is nice. You get some pivot in there. I'm going to be honest, I don't really like the waist swivel in there. There's no real way to grab it and stop it from turning. I think maybe that's overly engineered, but I mean, I guess why take it away, right? But yeah, then maybe a little bit too well done. And then the legs can kick straight forward. You can go a little bit back. There's an upper thigh rotation, so I don't really know why everyone isn't collecting these and bailing on the Black Series, because that's what makes an action figure good, right? And then single jointed knees go 290, and then swivel at the knee, and the feet can point that far down, that far forward, and there's a forward-facing pin for rocker, allowing you to get both feet decently flat on the ground while you're doing posing. And then I don't have any other 375s, but again, once more, just for reference of scale, here's the Kenobi Series 501st, or Apo, as they insisted on calling him. So, yeah, I think he looks good. So, end of the day, what do I think of this 501st Vintage Collection, and just of the Vintage Collection? I'm going to be honest. My expectations were definitely blown away by this figure. It's definitely a lot better than I thought 375 truly was going to be. I remember I got out of 375 back in the 20-teens when they really started hammering back to 5 POA and stuff. And I know the TVC has always had articulation, but I just, I remember, 375 always being a little bit more limited, and the Clone Wars 375 figures always had pretty good articulation to them. And then I remember, you'd go and grab a Saga Legends, and they'd try to slip a really old sculpt from, like, Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith in there, and, you would get some stinkers every now and then. And, so, I've always thought of TVC as having some articulation, but Black Series, just due to its size, having, like, superior articulation. And a little part of me thinks there are definitely things that Black Series does better, especially like around the shoulder joints, but because of their size, they have the tolerances to where they can definitely like do things differently from TVC. These aren't bad. And you know what? I do think sentimentally on my childhood years of playing with 375s, but I grew up, my hands got bigger, my hands fit a Black Series better. When my hands were littler, a 375 would fit the hand good, but they just feel really little. I don't dislike them. I'm probably not going to become a full-blown supporter of TVC, but maybe once in a blue moon there might be just something I can't pass up. I'm also a prequel collector at heart. I like the OT and I love the sequels, but they aren't brave enough to make sequel figures. So I, Black Series has really been prequel focused lately, and that's kind of, speaking to me as well. So, I'm glad I experimented. I'm glad I took a look. It gives me a better understanding. And if this is the base body for TVC clones going forward, I also understand why people would want to pick up a bunch of these. So, all in all, I'm glad I drank the Kool-Aid. And speaking of the Kool-Aid, in case you're in any way interested in one of these Hybrid Toy Reviews bourbon drinking glasses, you should check out the link in the description below to my merch shop. I will also try to remember to just link the cup itself. It is one of the newest additions to my merch store. I need to start plugging that a little bit more. I've fallen off in recent years. So go grab yourself a hybrid bourbon glass or any of the other interesting things in the shop if they catch your eye. Thank you for hanging out with me and seeing my TVC exploration. May the Force be with you, and hope you all have a good day.